call the meeting to order. This is the June 11th, 2026 regularly scheduled meeting of the Geneva Planning and Zoning Commission. And tonight we have one item on the agenda. Will be some training offered by the American Planning Association. And we have some honored guests from our city to the north and city to the south. So we'll continue with the meeting and look forward to a healthy and vibrant discussion. I'll call the, or maybe Matt, could you call the roll for us for Geneva?
Moran.
Moran here.
Slivka.
Slivka here.
Holloman.
Right when I take a bite. Holloman
Sorry, I misspoke. Baker.
here. Baker here.
And, Holloman.
Holloman here.
Still here. And Mead. Mead here. All right, thank you. And then I'm going to turn this, we have a majority of a quorum for the City of Batavia's Planning and Zoning Commission, so they must call a meeting to order.
Thank you. The June 11th meeting of the Batavia Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals is called to order with thanks to the City of Geneva for the pizza and the lovely young lady for the desserts.
There we go.
Can we call the roll?
Sure. Moore, Keycapter,
Here.
Cunha,
Here.
Eldrenkamp. Here. Goslin, Ballant. We do have a majority of a quorum present.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have any comments, questions, changes, or a motion to approve?
Moran, move to approve. Slivka, second.
All right, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, which were sent around by Matt earlier this week. Any comments, questions, additions, or motions?
Moran, move to approve. Slivka, second.
All those in favor of the approval of the minutes, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? That passes. Next item on the agenda is the public meeting, and this is we're the only item on the agenda tonight, and I will turn the floor over to the American Planning Association trainers, and I wonder if this would be a good time for our guests. You've heard all of our names. Maybe the folks from St. Charles could just let us know what commissioners are here and what city you represent.
Rita Paylighter, Plan Commission, City of St. Charles.
Awesome, thank you.
Corey Jones, St. Charles Planning Commission.
Awesome.
Corey.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And over here. I think we heard your names, but maybe for the record.
Kay Cuneo with Batavia.
Awesome.
Robert Keycapper, Batavia.
Doug Eldrenkamp with Batavia.
All right. And the floor is yours.
Cool, thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. I think with 2 meetings gavelled in, Jason and I will be counting this as 2 trainings. So we will be demanding double pay, but double nothing is still nothing. So that's okay. No, my name is Phil Green. I am the transportation and long-range planner for the village of Hoffman Estates, so up in the Northwest. I have been a Plan Commission trainer for 6-7 years, something like that at this point. So very, very excited to be here with all of you tonight. Jason?
Yeah, and the frame tonight, it's not just about zoning, it's about decision-making and making good decisions. And I feel like I have 3 seats at that table. I've been a professional planner for over 20 years.
A little closer?
Just for the broadcast. Bob Barker. Spay and neuter your animals. My professional job, I'm the Community Development Director for the Village of Lamont, so about 30-40 minutes south of here. As I said, I've been a professional planner, and I'm a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, so I've written staff reports as well. Your staff writes excellent staff reports. And then I sit on the Plan Commission where I live in Blue Island, Illinois. So hopefully I could bring all 3 of those perspectives to this meeting tonight for you.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things from kind of our perspective. Jason and I, like so we're old hands at this. I'm chairperson of a commission in Naperville, Housing and Human Rights, not Plan. So we're old hands at this. So we've found over time that these work so much better as conversations. I think some of my Batavia folks, I know I was out there not too long ago. I don't know if necessarily any of you guys were there. But there's a lot of content in this, and we're not expecting you to go away from this being able to recite planning history verbatim, right? Instead, really, I see our goal in this as to make it so that your meetings are a little bit better. They're a little bit better for you, they're a little bit better for your public, they're even a little bit better for the developers that are coming before you, and they're a little bit better for your staff, right? And that works better as a conversation. So at any time throughout tonight, we do have officially prescribed pauses for questions, but just stop us, right? We're happy to have that conversation at any time. We're here for you. So we want to make sure you're getting what you need out of this. To answer one question I've already had, just so you know kind of the two organizations partnering on this. So the American Planning Association, the Illinois chapter, that is our professional organization for planners throughout the state. DePaul University partnered with the APA way back when to actually put this training together. They're a little bit less hands-on these days, but they do still provide a lot of support to our program. And so we do have a sign-up sheet. Generally speaking, if you said yes to emails, most of those are just going to be, hey, here are some events about planning that if you want to learn more, you can go to those. We're going to skip over that. So we have a lot of different people here. I kind of like to just get a general sense as to why you became a commissioner, and I will spoil the wrong answer for you already. The why is not because the mayor asked me to. If that is your answer, go one level deeper and tell me why you said yes when the mayor asked you to. If we can go around real quick, it doesn't have to be deep.
I sat on the housing commission for 7 years, and this was
Yeah, for the millions watching at home.
I sat on the Housing Commission for about 7 years, and this was the next progression.
Sure. Great. Thanks.
I accepted because I'm a lifelong 55 years resident of the city of St. Charles, and I want to be a part of the future.
Great.
I was alderman for 12 years, and I knew how important it was to have a good plan commission that you can depend on, and so doing my part.
I've worked for a park district for 20 years, and I know how important planning can be, so that's why I came here.
I come from more of like a small business background, so I guess that piece, and then, more of like a, if you don't like what you see, or if you want to be involved, then get involved. And try to, that sort of perspective, I guess.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I've been on the Plan Commission 11 years. I was on the Strategic Plan Commission before that. But professionally, I'm an architect, planner, developer. So had been on the other side of the commission meetings, and thought it might be a good opportunity to be on, add something to this side.
Absolutely.
I've been on for about 6 years. Before this, I was on the school board, the library board. I was the city treasurer, and planning is the key to everything. So I thought this was an important step.
I've been on the commission plus or minus 15 years. My career was in commercial real estate, and after I stopped coaching kids sports for our kids, I thought, how else can I give back to the community? And this seemed like a natural fit for what I could bring my skill set to the table.
I'm in my first year on the commission, and I accepted because I thought it was a good way to help represent my community, but also learn more about how the very local level government works.
I'm going on 2 years, and I became a commissioner because my wife told the mayor to ask me to.
I guess that's acceptable.
That counts as why you said yes. Okay, I'll go with that.
But that's okay, because I'm really enjoying it. I believe it or not, I'm one of those weird people who likes committee meetings and going into the weeds on details and stuff. And I get to exercise my sense of humor once in a while. I don't have a least favorite part so far. I'm sure I will eventually, but not yet. Our staff, by the way, is one of the absolute favorite parts of being a commissioner. They're great.
This is my first year on the commission. I bring to the table 30 years of construction as a union carpenter. I look forward to serving my community, and that's why I accepted.
Thank you. All right, thanks guys, appreciate it. It's nice to know a little bit more about you. Jason, I'll just keep us rolling and then we can dive in and whatever. So we're going to talk a lot tonight about you. I shared this last time I was in Batavia, but my wife kind of grew up in this whole area. She grew up between Geneva and Batavia. We're here many, many weekends out of the year because she loves coming back to where she grew up. Batavia's Plan Commission was the first Plan Commission I ever went to. I grew up in the UK. My education was all over there. When I moved over here, we were living with my mother-in-law right on East Wilson Street. And one night in the dead of winter, it was like February, I toddled off to a Plan Commission meeting and heard all about a garage that wanted a variation, and I didn't really know what was going on, and now we're here. But you guys are instrumental, right, to keeping that going. And we're going to talk a lot about your role, because I think what we've found over many, many years of doing these trainings, and I think, to speak for myself, a reason I love doing these trainings is because it makes me a better professional to kind of get your insights into being on that side of the dais, right? It gives me that understanding so that when I'm in work and I'm working with my Plan Commission, I'm very lucky that I don't really do the development side of things so much anymore. But I have this understanding now from meeting all these different Plan Commissions that there are a lot of pain points that we often all have in common. There are a lot of nuances from town to town as well. But when we talk about what your role is, and I will warn you, I don't read these slides verbatim. You have them. If you want the audiobook version, that's a separate fee. So here's how I kind of see the role of the commission, right? And my former older person might appreciate this at a little bit of a different level. Volunteer commissions are integral in implementing community policy. Right? And the key word that does a lot of the heavy lifting in that is implementing. Because sometimes when we speak to commissioners, when we hear about their reasons, and we didn't really hear this many of you tonight, which is great, sometimes the role of the commission is a little bit difficult for people to kind of get to grips with, maybe because they haven't been to a ton of meetings before, maybe because, you know, when you're speaking to the general public, what we do in this room isn't always the clearest thing, right? So sometimes people kind of think that this is where decisions get made, this is where policy gets created, all of those kind of things. And we all know that that's not true, right? The policy gets made by our elected officials, and it's our job to be kind of part of that process in implementing that policy that gets set. And so in your role as a volunteer commissioner, I think a lot of you kind of hit this note that really your job is to be that voice of the community vision, the voice of the community character, and we'll talk a lot tonight about the different ways that having that voice can kind of play out in a meeting. But as some of you noted, and I appreciated the irony of you saying you're one of the weird people that likes these when you have two professionals who are literally here volunteering to do more work.
I had 2 Plan Commission meetings last week.
Yeah, so we're right there with you. But a big part of this is staying on top of things. So like I said, tonight is a really, really broad training. We're going to hit the high notes on a lot of things, but this really shouldn't be the end of the journey. We'll give you a ton of resources to kind of keep your own interest going as you go
Phil,
through
one of the
this.
things I want
Please.
to add too is like, you know, a mistake that like a sort of a new commissioner can make is that thinking everybody has the same job in a public hearing, and we don't.
Jerry?
We all do different things. Oh my gosh.
We're actually on YouTube right now.
I know. Hi, YouTube. I got it. So, and especially where I work and where I live, the commission I'm on is a combined planning and zoning commission. So sometimes you're looking at standards for variations, sometimes you're considering policy, like your upcoming comprehensive plan. And so being on a commission, you're wearing lots of different hats, and hopefully some of this training could kind of teach you how to change your hats as the agenda items come up and change for you.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the other folks that we kind of have involved in all of this. So like we say, the buck doesn't always stop with you guys. Most of the times it won't. You have your elected officials as well, right? So whereas you guys are very, very typically focused on more development-based issues, new construction, changes to construction, Like Jason said, I know here in Geneva we've got a comprehensive plan on the way, so kind of considering those visions of how the community wants to develop over time, right? Your elected officials have all of that and then a whole bunch more in terms of fiscal policy. Sometimes they have to get involved in some personnel issues if we have unions involved, or the hiring and monitoring of city managers, things of that nature. And really their job is to provide that kind of policy vision that then it falls to our varied commissions to carry out. You've also got us, the professional staff in the room. Like Jason said, these 3 cities are just full of some of the absolute best staff we have in the state. I know the building official for St. Charles personally, just a fantastic guy. These guys all do fantastic staff reports, but it goes beyond that staff report, right? The way I like to think about the role of the professional in terms of how this relationship between a professional and a commission goes, because it can be kind of weird, right? We get asked a lot, like, so do you work for me? Can I tell you what to do? Because I'm just setting up a new commission at work right now. Like, so do I tell you what to do? I'm like, well, kind of, but no, right? I think we're kind of the bridge. We're that translator is how I like to think of our role. Our responsibility is to make sure that you as commissioners and our elected officials have the information you need to make an informed decision or an informed recommendation, as the case might be, right? We're also providing information to the public. Had a really fun conversation today with someone at my school district. I'm trying to work with them on getting some of their students more involved in local government. And I said, we have this whole workshop planned out. We'd love to do it with you guys. She's like, oh, can I see it? No. She says, no. That's probably your IP, right? And I'm like, honey, I work in government. We don't have IP. Like, it's yours. Have it, right? So we are giving that information freely to anyone who needs it. We're also working with our developers, and I know a few of us have been on that side of things as well. And sometimes that can be really difficult, right? And that's not always the clearest thing, because when we have controversial cases, and we'll talk about some horror stories tonight too, which will hopefully be completely non-applicable to any of you, but it's good to know what's out there. If you're kind of Joe Public sitting at home, you're reading the local patch or whatever it is, sometimes people kind of think that staff are the ones bringing these developments forward. We're the ones who are literally building the Trader Joe's or not building the Trader Joe's, as the case might be. Or, we're plopping a data center down in the middle of your home, whatever it might be. And that's just not true, right? That's not our job. We are here. There is a legal process that has to be followed, and it's our job to kind of act as a guide along that process. So it's not our job to advocate for anybody's requests. It's simply our job to kind of gather the information from all relevant parties and then distribute that information so that everybody is working from the same playing field, has all that information that they need, and we can all make more informed decisions, more informed recommendations. I tell everyone, most planners have what I like to call the folder of hopes and dreams, which is every development project that didn't live long enough in this world to actually grace your desks, right? So for every case you see, we've probably seen about 20 times that many of people with ideas. I once had a man spend literally 2 hours crying on my shoulder because he couldn't bring his vision for the next great hookah lounge in Illinois to life. Devastated, right? Devastated. So that is what we do. We answer questions. We find information. We tell people, hey, if you want to do that, this is the process you have to take. And we make sure that all of you have everything you need as you go through it. So how can you help us? Let us know things ahead of time, right? Some of the worst horror stories that you hear from other planners in other communities when you're doing these trainings is when staff has a little bit more of a contentious relationship with the commission, and nobody wants that, right? Sometimes the commission maybe doesn't quite fully understand the role of the staff in the process, and so they're almost playing this kind of gotcha game or making sure that there's nothing nefarious going on. So the worst situations we hear is usually when commissioners come out of the blue at a meeting with a question that nobody was expecting, right? And then your poor plan is buried in 200 pages of zoning code trying to find the right answer. This has all the potential to be a wonderful relationship, and your planner wants to help you. They want you to have a good meeting. They want everything to go as smoothly as possible. So if you know ahead of time that you have questions about a case, about a developer, about, hey, I think I have a question, am I even able to ask that question? Give them a call, right? I tell all my commissioners, I am available. Give me a call, drop me an email. We'll probably share that question again at the meeting to make sure everybody has the answer to it, because I bet you if you had that question, somebody else did as well. But it helps us if we can come into these meetings prepared to answer the questions you might have. Sometimes that might mean we're doing the work. Sometimes that might mean we're sending it off to the petitioner, to the applicant, and saying, hey, my commissioners want to know X, Y, and Z. Can you have that answer ready for them when you're presenting, please, right? If you are running into issues, right? And the example I'll give on this one, the one that we hear a lot, if you are getting variations, right, for, I don't know, let's say garage size, right? You've seen a lot of these and you're approving them all the time, or if it's a special use for sandwich shops and you're seeing all these special uses for sandwich shops and you're always approving them, let staff know, like, hey, maybe this shouldn't be a special use anymore because we're always approving these, right? We're looking for this constant kind of two-way dialogue. That's how the best relationships between commissions and staff works, is if we're in this two-way dialogue. Because even though you don't set the policy as to what special use is, flagging that to staff can then take that to the elected officials and see if they want to explore changing that, or if they have another reason for not doing so, right? So if you take anything away from this part of the training, it's that there's no such thing as too much communication in this job. There's no such thing as too much notice that you have a question, right? We want to know those, and there really is no such thing as stupid questions, especially if you tell us ahead of time, because then we won't be rolling our eyes live on YouTube. You'll get that one later, it's okay. Your staff report is super important. All right, we've kind of talked a little bit about these already. You guys have some great ones. This should be the document of record, right? And we're always kind of thinking, worst case scenario on this one is what if this guy needs to take that? Because what if, way down the road, we end up in a lawsuit, right? And we're looking back and we're trying to make sure we have all the information and everything is consistent, and your staff report is a big, big part of that backbone. Again, we can go super into detail about what a good staff report looks like. I already know you guys have seen good staff reports, so we're not going to do that. Instead, if you remember anything about staff reports, it's this. Number one, if you're not seeing something that you think you should be seeing, ask your staff ahead of time, right? Hey, I wish I had this information. Sometimes, and that's kind of what we're here to do tonight, sometimes the answer to that is going to be, that's kind of not relevant to this case. Maybe that's not even relevant to the Plan Commission. And we'll talk a lot tonight about sometimes the Plan Commission lane can be very, very clear, and you have to stay in that lane. And sometimes that's really, really frustrating as a commissioner because you know that you want to do more, but you cannot for multiple reasons, right? The other thing that I would encourage you to think about with your staff report is to read it. And that sounds really basic. You're laughing. But you're smiling. That's close to a laugh. You don't want to be that commissioner, and I promise you that every story I tell you tonight is true and comes from lived experience, but I will change the names of the innocent to protect them. You don't want to be that commissioner who, at the beginning of the meeting, because they have a problem with this project and they want to prove how smart they are, they're going to sit there and say, and staff, can you tell me, are we at the point in this proceeding that this developer would have thought about doing a traffic study? And then your poor staff planner has no choice but to say, so if you turn to page 2 of the staff report, you'll find the traffic study and all the appropriate analysis, right? That's not a good look for anybody. And the feedback I think we hear most of all from elected officials is they don't want a plan commission that frankly is going to embarrass them, because you guys are in such an ambassadorial position for your communities. You are basically the welcome committee for people that want to come to your community and do business, who want to invest in your city. You are probably some of the first residents that they see. So if you're sitting there and you quite clearly haven't turned to page 2 of that report, that's not a great welcoming committee. And I hear it from elected officials that those are the commissioners who might not get their terms re-upped at the end of those terms, right?
I want to add something
Please.
too about the staff report as somebody that just how to read a staff report, because they could be overwhelming, they could be hundreds of pages and lots of exhibits, so I just put down a couple notes for myself, What you want to read is just what is being requested by the petitioner, right? Make sure you understand that part, it's pretty easy. Then look and see what standards in your zoning code, municipal code, whatever, apply. I read some, Geneva reports and the standards there and how it's applied. It's very clear. And then what facts of that case support the decision being made. I don't think a recommendation is even the most important part of a staff memo. And as somebody that sits on a PZC, I have been guilty of turning to the last page and checking the recommendation first. But really, it's that analysis that your staff is providing for you. That is where the beauty and the meat lives in a staff report. So if you want to boil it down to those 3 things, what's being requested, what standards apply, what are the facts? And I'll just share, like Phil said, call me. I'd rather spend 20 minutes on a Tuesday than 20 extra minutes in a boardroom, So definitely give us a call. All right, Phil.
Cool. The other thing to think about with a lot of these, right? Again, sometimes, I'm going to speak very, very candidly because I don't know any other way to be. But sometimes when we're on these commissions, especially when we're new to these commissions, it can feel kind of daunting, right? It can feel a little bit like the mayor has asked me to be on this commission and I will defend the city of Geneva with my life, right? It can feel a little bit like I am this last line of defense between this community and bad development. And what I want you all to kind of leave with a sense of reassurance on with this is that you play a super important part in the development process in your community. You play a super important part in representing the desires of the community from what you see. But you are not alone in doing that. You have professional staff with all kinds of specializations, with all kinds of experience, who are doing reviews before it even gets to you. In a lot of cases, you might even have other boards and commissions who have a more specialized look at things. For example, we already have a former housing commissioner here. I'm a housing commissioner too. So it doesn't always all fall on you. And I share that because I hear it a lot. I hear a lot from commissioners who really want to get in the weeds on building related issues because they're like, well, if I don't, who else is going to? The building official, right? The person who's qualified and credentialed to do that review and to sign off on matters of life safety. And I never ever believe that that's coming from a negative place. I never believe that that's coming from a place that they don't trust the staff. I just recognize, again, we're both in those seats some of the times too, that when you're in that seat and you're only seeing this case before you for an hour, 20 minutes, whatever it might be, you feel like you got a lot to do. And so again, I want you to leave tonight just with that kind of reflection of, okay, cool. Even though it feels sometimes like we're kind of the only part of this process, you're not. You are one stop on a very long train that has been tried and tested over and over again to make sure you're getting quality developments in your communities from all different manner of lenses. Think about the fact that, your village, your city, whatever it might be, there is an attorney. That's you. You want to introduce yourself?
No, I was just, I'm glad I passed the bar.
I never pass a bar.
I'm Scott Pinson. I'm one of the attorneys for the city of Geneva.
So depending on the case, right? Some communities have the attorney there all the time. Some communities, if the attorney is there, probably get ready for a rough night. That's kind of been my working experience, is if I walk in the room and our attorney's there, I know I'm in for a bad night, right? Ask me how I know, when I've literally had cases before where some of my public comment came in the form of, you know those like ransom notes in the movies where they cut different letters out of newsletters? Actually happened to me. Super, super fun, right? Your attorney is there to protect you. They are there to protect your city, right? That's who they serve. They serve the organization writ large of the city. And it cannot be understated how important your role is in that process, because a lot of times, right, an attorney's job is to keep you out of court. I'm not an attorney, I just play one on TV. But their job is to keep you out of court. And a lot of the ways that they do that in land use and zoning matters is to try and prove that that applicant hasn't exhausted all their other opportunities. So most times, an attorney's first play in those kind of lawsuits is to actually get them kicked all the way back to you guys. So it's up to these commissions and the staff that serve you to make sure you have a good paper trail, proving what's happened, proving that they had due process, proving that the commissioners, as Jason's already kind of alluded to, you're going to hear the word standards over and over and over again tonight, because it cannot be stressed enough that that is your safe zone. Your safe zone is being able to tie every recommendation you make back to your standards. I have been in meetings, I have been in trainings where I have heard the horror stories of commissioners saying things like, well, I just don't think we should approve anything on that land until insert random thing here. And the attorney goes, great, now we have a takings case on our hands because we've just said we're going to not let them develop that land for an arbitrary reason, right? Your attorney's looking at you to make good standards-based recommendations, to make their life easier, because we're always imagining what if. Because the worst case scenario for a city in these kind of cases is something comes through they don't want, they do a real bad job of handling it, the person sues, and now you get the thing you didn't want, and you're the ones paying for it, right? That's kind of our worst case scenario in this. Yes?
I have a question kind of related to
Sure.
your last comment, and maybe you're going to get to this. So this is this idea that you're talking about where, you know, a commissioner might have an opinion
Yes.
about a use of something versus what's exactly presented in the standards.
Sure.
So, and this is something that I have, I don't want to say struggled, but, you know, thought a lot about.
Yeah.
That if, you know, we get the reports and there is a recommendation at the end that they've met these standards and all this, and yet we still all come together and we discuss it and talk about it.
Sure.
So it seems like there has to be some sort of balance between, I mean, there's a reason that we're all here. There's
Sure.
a reason that we're voting or, you
100%.
know. So everybody brings their own sort of priorities and past and experiences and all that to the table. So that line of like, you know, maybe I don't think that something is a good use of land
Sure.
and I have my own whatever, but yet the city is saying, well, they've met all the standards and
Sure.
So that.
I think I get you,
You see
right?
what I'm,
right?
where I'm
Totally
going with
do.
this, right?
And honestly, that is the core tension at all of this, and I'm going to skip around a little bit because I love this question, right? And this is the heart of what we're here for tonight. So I kind of have a multi-part answer. Stop me at any point and feel free to follow up, right? It's true for anyone. I'm gonna start with the history of what a plan commission was, right? It literally used to be the case that you'd get to plan commission and a real estate developer would turn up, they'd roll out some blueprints, and a plan commission would be a bunch of licensed planners and architects and people of that nature, and they would review the plan live and in person in that moment, right? As the, I'm going to use the term bureaucracy, but not in a negative way, has grown, we have professionals who do that, and they're kind of presenting you a much more neat packet of information that work, that technical review work has already been undertaken. So what is the role of a plan commission today? right? And that, I think, is kind of the heart of the question here, right? Two-part answer is what I have for you. Part one is what has really helped me when I think about these questions is if I have a live case in front of me, as far as I'm concerned in that moment, the play is frozen. What do I mean by that, right? I mean that as soon as I have a live active case on the table, I have no other option but to apply the rules that we have in place, and those rules are our zoning code, right? An example I'll give you, I've worked on industrial developments before, and I've had board members, commissioners say like, you know, I don't like how many trucks are available here, I don't like how many dock doors they have here, and I'm like, cool, that is great feedback. You cannot apply that to this case, because we don't have a rule about that right now, but I'm gonna ask you to hold on to that thought, because then that becomes a policy question for the village board that staff can then take back to the city council, and we can then say like, hey, we heard from commissioners that they wish they had more teeth to apply this, so moving forward, that's how we do that, right? Policy is kind of frozen in time when we have an active case in front of us. The other part about recommendations. Recommendations are a difficult one. Here's what I'll tell you. The job of a commissioner is to read standards and apply standards, right? It is totally possible that, like you say, with your lived experience, with where you are, you might have information that is not in the staff report just because you know the neighborhood a little bit differently, right? Your task as a commissioner is to apply that knowledge to the standards, right? So whenever you're voting on a recommendation, you need to be able to confidently say, I'm voting yes because I think it meets the standards, or I'm voting no because I don't think it meets the standards, right? You don't necessarily have to go into a ton of detail as to why you think that, but I just need you to know that you've applied that experience and those opinions to those standards, and it's not an opinion that's completely unrelated, because if I can be totally honest, I had this conversation with a lot of commissioners. If that is what you want to do, and I don't think this is what you were saying by any means, you don't want to be a commissioner, you want to be an elected official, right? And I've had this conversation with commissioners where I've had this training, and they've said to me like, but I'm doing this to help people, like why won't you let me help people? I'm like, and I love that for you, but the role we have as commissioners is really technical in a lot of ways, right? We have to be seen to be fairly applying these standards, and I'll tell you why. It's because if we don't, one of the pathways, and I'm looking to our attorney to kind of back me up on this one, but I've been there with this, right? It's a discrimination lawsuit. And it's because if we're not applying those standards consistently, and we're not talking just about the case, if we bring any other kind of subjective opinions into these things that we cannot link back to those standards, someone could say, well, they voted no because of my national origin. They voted no because of my gender. They voted no because of X, Y, and Z. I've heard it before. Variations are a really hard one. We'll get into those later tonight. Well, but that person has 5 kids. Why can't we give them a bigger garage? Well, how many kids per square foot? You know, like once we get into these subjective measures, it gets really, really difficult to defend. So you absolutely are right. You're bringing your experience, you're bringing your opinions, you're applying those to those standards. So usually, and we have your standards up here coming up later, there might be one that's like, it's not injurious to the health and welfare and whatnot of the community. And if you deep down believe that that use would be, it hasn't met that standard for you. And you absolutely have the right, and your staff can talk you through the technicalities of how you make that motion, to say, actually, I'm going to amend the findings, I'm going to move that we amend the findings of fact. I don't think they do meet this standard. And I'll tell you, no offense, developers have thin skins. I have had phone calls from developers who got their project approved, but one commissioner voted no, and I had moved jobs. And that developer called me up. Yeah, why did Commissioner Smith vote no? I don't work there anymore. But they were so upset because they want to know. They want that approval. A lot of times financing is impingent on it, and so on and so forth. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to add something know, it's like, I think it's tricky because like we talk about the public and you're listening for evidence and you're hearing emotion, right? And you need to be able to set aside the emotion, be respectful of that emotion, but really listen for the evidence. And I find being a plan commissioner is a really hard job because I am the public. Sometimes I'm like, I'm the public too, but not here. And I think, I don't want to pretend I'm some planning martyr, but in my own community, I voted yes for a project I did not like. It was a group home. It met all of the standards. What I was able to do as a plan commissioner was make it the best project possible. I thought, if this group home opened next to my house with me and my wife, and they absolutely could have, as a special use, how could I make sure it follows the standards that are required by the community and other conditions to make this as safe as possible, right? And then just last week, I had a guy that wanted to open a barber shop. Great entrepreneur, second location. The way it was presented was garbage as a text amendment. And I wanted to give this guy his barber shop. I really did. It's a building that's been vacant for 10 years. I couldn't. It didn't meet any of the standards. The way it was presented just didn't. We did ask him to come back and maybe do a little bit better job. But, you know, I think in those instances, you know, you want to make sure the public, while they might disagree with some of the decision-making that you're doing, I say they should never doubt that you handled it professionally. And I think that's what's the most important part of being a plan commissioner.
I mean, I think that, you know, that the beauty of the commission is the diversity of its members. I mean, that's what I think. And so, so I have found it challenging in the past to feel like, okay, I feel very invested in the community, and I think that this is a good idea or not a good idea, or, you know, or whatever it is. And so it's challenging in a way sometimes to try to get those things to always come back to the standards, and how did the city feel like this was met, and maybe I didn't necessarily feel like it was there, or whatever, or vice versa. But I do think that the background of the commissioners themselves really, you know, add that different perspective, like with every case that we see.
Yeah, you're absolutely going to get those cases, and those are your questions, right? Like, that's what you're calling staff up ahead of time and saying, like, hey, how did we land on feeling this? Like, what evidence am I not seeing? What am I thinking? Like, did you consider this? Those are that's exactly what you're here to do, right? You're absolutely right. That is the job. You're making sure these standards are being met. Now, what that looks like to you is going to be different than what it looks like to me. I'm just telling you, legally, you want to make sure it all comes back to those standards, right? And like Jason kind of hit on with the public, you know, I don't think it's breaking news to say that things can get a little bit heated sometimes, and things are sometimes getting a little more contentious than they ever have before. Like Jason said, what you are hearing is going to be emotion. And sometimes that can be really, really difficult to deal with because it's our nature to want to help people, right? Like, oh, they're hurting, let me take that away from them. You kind of said it yourself just now, your job is to represent the whole community, the city. The best thing I've ever heard in a meeting, we sat through 24 hours of public hearings for a project once. 100 and something people came out to speak against it. Now, the people who would benefit from this project, do they come out? No, they do not. People who like something do not come out. They stay at home. People who do not like something, they come out. And sometimes they want blood and they want answers. And I heard them say to this board member, how could you do this to us? Would you want to live with this in your backyard? And he said, very similar to what Jason just said, nope. But I'm voting yes because it's right for the entire community, because it meets our standards, because it provides a benefit to the tax base, because he was an elected official who had to consider those kind of things, because it provides employment that our community needs. So it's our job, when we are the voice of that whole community, to sometimes have to zoom out from those hyper neighborhood level concerns that you're going to hear sometimes, those very emotional concerns, and think about that big picture of what is our village, what is our city, what is our community trying to be, and that you'll find in your comprehensive plan. Cool. We'll talk about the developer a little bit. The developer, I think of them as, you know, the salespeople, right? But they're selling you a solution. just like all sales. Sales is about solutions, right? They are reading your comprehensive plan, they're looking at your zoning map, they're seeing what you want, they're doing their market studies, and they're coming to you and they're saying, hey, I think you have this problem. You need more housing. You need more retail. Your residents would love a high-end steakhouse, and I'm here to provide that, right? Your tax base would love this really smelly warehouse, right? That's what they're bringing forward, is they have, I don't know if warehouses smell, just roll with it. But their job is to give you the information you need, and this is why I like the standard so much, because it's an easy conversation. You're asking, hey, you want to build here? These are the standards you have to meet. And it is the developer's job to prove to you that they meet those standards. It is their job to give you that information through your staff as it might be, right? They're going to have specialties. They're going to have their own products. The way that I like, and I think, you know, we're in very good hands here tonight, but sometimes I feel like we end up in this position of like the developer is an outsider and they're just coming here and trying to make money. That is correct. I became a U.S. citizen in 2021. I had to pass a civics test. One of the questions is, what type of society does America base itself on? The answer was capitalism. These companies are here to make money. That's not a surprise. But your job as a commissioner is to go beyond that, right? Your job as a commissioner is to say, cool, I accept that this is someone external coming into my community to build something and turn a profit. But is the way they're doing that, is the product they are doing that with good for my community as we ask for it in these standards? If you think about things from the developer's perspective, a lot often rides on your recommendation. I have seen projects where even though it is the elected officials who ultimately make the final decision, if they don't get that plan commission recommendation, their next round of funding falls through. So a lot can weigh for them on your role in this. I have also seen cases where developers have put a lot of money into engineering on a project, and the plan commission has been trying to negotiate with them, well, make it 20% smaller, well, do this, well, do that. And they've gone back and they've iterated, and it's been continued, and they've come back and they've sent them back. And we're 6 meetings in. That developer now has a $350,000 engineering review fee due to them from the village, and I've had to call them up and say, hey, you know that project that we put you through 6 meetings for and then we denied? You owe me $350,000 for reviewing it. Again, if we think about the role of this commission as a welcoming committee to the city for people trying to make investments, that will travel, and it's not a good look. So if we're going to say no to something, we want to do that relatively quickly and not try and drag them out through a super long process.
Let me add something too. Just what you had said about profit, because that is a tricky point, you know, and I would just say projects that aren't profitable do not get built. Right. You just have to learn to live with that part of the pie, is all I would add to that. Because I have had people that want to know the rents or want to know a price or whatever, just assume that they will be profitable.
Yes. You know, it's a question we get a lot, honestly. It's not the responsibility of the commission. It's not even the responsibility of your elected officials to judge if a profit is going to make money. It is not, whether or not a project has market viability, completely outside of our purview. I highly recommend staying really far away from those kind of questions, because I've been in meetings before now where I've had to tell commissioners that they're really running close to running afoul of the Federal Fair Housing Act because they're getting too in the weeds on rents. And that is a real danger that we can run into. Think of it like this. The way I like to think of these things, as commissioners, you have 2 tools. You have authority and you have power. Authority are the things that you can do. They found them in the village code, they're in your zoning code. It is the actual things that are written out that you have the authority to recommend a denial. You have the authority to set conditions if there is a logical connection between those conditions and the potential negative impacts of a project. Power is something you can ask for, and maybe they'll give it to you because they want that vote, but they know they don't have to. They can tell you to go pound sand, and you have to smile and say thank you. You have power. Don't ever mistake that power for authority, because that is where things go wrong. The other thing to think about is these developers also often have a lot of other jurisdictions to answer to. Your Department of Transportations, depending on the roads they're on. If you have a fire district, I've worked in communities with fire districts before now, that can be a nightmare because they see a big development coming to town and they start rubbing their hands for all the new signal improvements they're going to get at intersections. And then the developer's calling me crying because now their intersection bill is huge. And I'm like, so tell them no, right? There's a lot of people that all these reviews go through, and they all have a different perspective on what they want. Your regional planning commission, I'm going to leave you on this point on this one. Ours is called CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. Most of the technical responsibility lies in transportation. One thing that CMAP does that's really, really cool, and I encourage you all to look it up, they produce something called a neighborhood snapshot or a community snapshot. They basically process a ton of data and they make it freely available. So you can look up St. Charles, Geneva, Batavia, and you can find out average salaries, average household incomes, languages people speak at home, whether people have access to the internet or not. You can find out a ton of information about your community completely free of charge, and I highly recommend anyone who is interested in serving the public, get to know who the public is that you're serving, right? That is such a big part of the public service puzzle, is knowing who your neighbors are.
Phil, let me add something about CMAP
Please.
too. So I have used that exact report in Lamont. Lamont continues to build new homes. School district is stressed by it. And so it gives us some really good numbers that we could share and have a collaborative, open conversation about the age of our community, that it is aging, and all these sorts of things. So a plug for that community snapshot, Google St. Charles, Geneva, Batavia, CMAP, it'll come up. The other thing that CMAP really does for communities that I've found valuable is what they call local technical assistance. And so in Lamont, we have gotten assistance for a parking study, a civic space study. We did an entire ADA study for the entire community. And right now we're working on a site redevelopment study. We do have a fire protection district in Lamont. They are moving their fire station, they're building a new one, and we'll have 5 acres adjacent to downtown available, like a massive expansion of our downtown, a massive potential. And so they're able to bring in, we have a small staff of 2, it's me and a consultant. And so we are able to use their expertise as planners, and they'll bring in consulting teams, and they could really, help you stretch on certain things. And I mean, staff, if you guys are already using some CMAP tools, I'm sure you are.
Cool. That's part 1 of the training, right? So the big key takeaways, right? What you do is important. And you're going to hear a lot of Jason and I tonight telling you about the lanes you stay in. Don't let that feel like that's diminishing the importance of what you do. You play a huge role in guiding development in your communities. It is a different role than that of your elected officials. And if sometimes you're feeling a little bit too bound by the role of a plan commissioner, it might be time to think about being an elected official one day. Just don't tell them that you're planning that, because they get really, really upset when people run against them. They don't like that, strangely enough. Your staff is here to support you. So even though we don't work directly under your direction, even though we have our own bosses, we're always available for a question. Just give it to us. We'll have it, right? Your public, your job is to listen to them. But remember, listening and accepting doesn't always mean agreeing. Sometimes the really, really hard part about this job is pulling yourself out of that emotion. And when you've got a lot of people in the room giving you a lot of emotion, it's really important that you listen to it, that you acknowledge that this is a very, very emotional issue for a lot of people, and you can accept that. You don't have to agree with it, and you can lift yourself out and see that big picture for the whole community as it applies to your standards. And then remember that your developer, even though they're here to turn a profit, you are responsible for helping make sure that they're doing so in a way that fits the vision for your community. Do we have any questions on any of that stuff? Seeing none. Jason, you want to take the lead, and then I'll just interrupt you on this one?
Oh, yeah. I judge the quality of community by, first, it's downtown, and second, by its pizza. And this was pretty good pizza. I'm a proud Southsider, so I feel like I hold the key to pizza.
You said
but
only pretty good, huh? Yeah.
it's good. It's darn good. It's darn good pizza. I would be proud to have this in Lamont. All right, more on the responsibilities of commission members. You know, that be prepared part is very important. I would say the most part about being prepared is, you know, that site visit for me as a plan commissioner. You know, that flat plan isn't going to show you a steep slope, or, you know, what's in the neighbor's backyard. When you do go there, though, just remember, you're there to observe, not to interview. You do not want to have a discussion about the project, especially with the homeowner present or whatnot, and they come out and say, hey, who are you? And playing an active role, you know, like, we don't get bonus points for staying silent in a meeting. You know, the best meetings are when you come prepared and your commissioner, like you said, people bring different perspectives. So even if you're there for year one, just jump in and start talking. Playing an active role as a commissioner is, I think, the best way to be a commissioner. We kind of went through a lot of these, you know, already with Phil. I would say make all comments on the record is the one that stands out for me, because that's what we're trying to do in a meeting, is create a factual public record. And of course, as I mentioned before, be that professional, which is really hard. That looks like an easy plan commission meeting to me, but yeah, please do, Phil.
I don't think it can be overstated how powerful your position is in a public meeting, and that's why we stress this idea of being professional. I've been in a public hearing before now. It was a contentious project. It was a relatively small project, but it was a contentious project. And the chairperson in that particular community wasn't the most professional, I'll be honest. And the public was already very emotional about this project. They really, really didn't want to see it in their neighborhood, right? Someone wanted to take some land and turn it from a residential to a commercial use. They really didn't want to see it. We had a lot of commentary, and some members of the public were not being courteous. There was some heckling from the back. There was some talking out of order. You know, we're ultimately here to run a meeting. And I can tell you that chairperson, when they were engaged, when they were running the meeting, yeah, we heard a little bit of chatter and whatnot, and a little bit of, you know, nah, that's not true, lies. We were okay. One point during the meeting, they gave up. And they kind of just sat back in their seat, and they kind of just laughed. And I promise you, that was the moment the crowd turned. People were standing up, people were yelling at the staff, people were yelling at the petitioner, and it was literally, you could pinpoint the moment that the chairperson relinquished control of that meeting. So even when you're in a particularly emotional meeting, even when you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm outnumbered, you have to recognize the power you hold by just being that adult in the room. It is basic psychology. If you model good, professional, courteous behavior, even when you don't feel like you're getting it 100% back from the other people in the room, you're getting it way more than you would if you weren't, and I can attest to it because we had to run out the back door of that one because it just turned. The moment the chairperson relinquished control of that meeting. So be that adult, keep things professional, customer service voice on. Thank you for your comments.
I feel like this is therapy for Phil.
Yes.
He has been through some of the worst meetings I've ever heard of. Like, I've never had some of these things happen to me. I've never gotten a ransom note. I've never walked out the back door. Phil, what do you do? What is the common denominator here? The other one that I just, you know, avoid jargon. That's easy. We We have planned unit developments. I always say planned unit development before I say PUD, because some people want to say PUD. I don't assume even that people know that the Illinois Department of Transportation is IDOT. You know, there's a lot of jargon, and especially with agencies that we work with. They have, in Cook County, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, the MWRD, makes a lot of decisions about sewer. So that's just an easy one. I'm sure the staff model is the same. You know, I spell out Unified Development Ordinance every dang time and then type UDO. That's our zoning code. So avoid that jargon because we want the people to understand. That's part of that being patient and courteous. It's not like these people don't even want me to know what they're talking about because I can't understand their lingo. It really helps make for a better meeting when the public knows what we're talking about. You know, you do a great job on hearings. I love that you, in the agenda, right, page 2 of the agenda is this is how this meeting is going to run. I'm going back to Lamont and doing that for my next PZC meeting. That is a great, great way to do that. So I don't need to worry about this slide. Some communities you do, not this one.
Before you go on, I guess
Yeah.
this is more for our commissioners. One of the things that and the hearing responsibilities and the Roberts Rules of Order. So like I did just now, I'm actually a guest, despite the fact that I often interject myself into meetings and will say, I don't think we should talk about that, or I think we should do that. Technically, I'm wrong. And I want you to know that I'm wrong when I do that. What we want to have happen ideally, and I can't speak for the attorneys for Batavia and St. Charles, but I'm going to guess they're going to say the same thing. In a perfect world, it's the community's hearing, but it's your hearing. And so that if someone is speaking about something that they shouldn't, it's off topic on the standards. It's not that you're mean, but being able to have somebody step forward, even particularly if it's not the chair. If it's one of you that raise a point of order and say, you know what, I think that discussion about economic viability, that's not relevant to our standards. That warms my heart. Because what that means is that everybody is going to see that not only does the attorney know how it and the staff, but the commission understands it. And it brings us back to those standards. And that's why when you might see me sitting at a meeting doing something like this, and I'm listening to hear what people are saying. Because as soon as I hear that first question, now all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, we're going off the standards. The developer, if this gets voted down, we're off that standard. And so I'm going to be worried about that. And if the chair doesn't correct it, and I might lean over and say, I think we need to do this. And the chair doesn't do it, I may let it go a little bit, but I'm going to jump in. And at that point, we're not having a bad meeting, but we're not having a good meeting because I suddenly interjected myself in a way that I shouldn't. And so one of the things that we talked about with these guys as well is that if you take nothing away from this, is the standards are your guide. So one of those things is this a relevant question? And you can certainly ask in the meeting, is this a relevant question before the meeting? Always start with those standards. If you can't tie it back to the standard, the answer is probably no. And then if somebody hears a question that you think isn't right, then also raise that. Or if somebody in the audience is talking about something that's extraneous, you can raise a point of order, always direct it to the chair. But the best meeting we can have is when I say nothing. And if we get into a meeting and I throw myself in and you say, you said you're not supposed to talk, that is absolutely appropriate. And then I'll say to the chair, I know, but this is why I did it. But we really want, in a perfect world, we want you all to run this meeting, and that's why you're here. So that's why I wanted to bring that at this point.
I want to bring that point back too and talk to my commission in Lamont, with the one that I staff, because at the last meeting, I'm sorry, Chairman, he was just going on and on about age-restricted housing because he didn't want more students in Lamont. And my agenda is just scribbled with out of order, what is the chair doing? This is like, so I was having that moment, but as staff, I don't want to, embarrass the Plan Commission and say, we're going in a dangerous place, but we were going in a dangerous place. And I like your point that as a commissioner, feel free to raise that point. Don't wait until something goes a little bit too far.
And you're, as other commissioners, I mean, for both of you, you should understand that if somebody calls you out, and I'm sure your fellow commissioners will, and there are some people that are just going to be difficult, but they should appreciate and understand that that's part of your job, is to hold the group to order. It's not the chairman's job. It shouldn't be my job, and it's not staff's job. But that's part of what you all do. And the more that we can empower you with that, when you run those meetings, it's so much better for the meeting. And that speaks to that issue about, what if the group starts getting out of control? You all might recall there were some meetings where people were being loud, and I would lean over to a chairman, not this chairman, but a chairman, and be like, this is starting, and you could see the room starting to get out of control because we weren't gaveling people back to order.
Right.
And so it's those sorts of things that you all should feel that you have authority for, because you do have authority over that. And I think that you can set a really good example for your community, and ultimately that makes those hearings run so much smoother and so much better, and we're focused on what we need to do. So I will shut up now and not interject myself anymore.
Yeah, no, please.
Because it happened to me at both council
Hit
and
your microphone.
at plan commission. Oh, sorry. Where I expected the attorney to jump in. And I said, what happened? And he said, I can't speak unless you ask me. And I went, oh, it was so maddening. So I took, that was at council. And so I took that to back of my head, and at plan commission, I keep thinking, is staff going to jump in here? Is staff going to jump in here? And they're not. That's not their job. So maybe sometimes, with apologies to my colleagues, I have to jump in and, and say, hey, are we on track here? But thank you for permission.
Yeah, no, I would just add to that, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Procedural question then. You're not saying that all the commissioners should be jumping in and questioning the line of discussion. It'd be appropriate to ask the chair, are we on topic
Right.
here, or we're going into a...
Yeah, so at the risk of being hyper-technical, I think that was one of the things we're not supposed to do. Avoid esoteric details of parliamentary procedure, which I excel at. But yeah, that's exactly right. So the question, it would be a point of order, and that would be direct, Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order, and that would go to the chair. And then if the chair wasn't sure, they may ask the person raising the point about, well, what's the question? If they're not sure about, well, I'm not sure, then the chair would probably look, if your attorney is there, would look, or plant, or staff, they'll turn over and say, well, what do you think about that? I'm not sure. It's a close call. Right. And that's how ideally that should happen. Let's say the chair makes a ruling that you don't like, and if that happens, also remember that you all, if you all control the meeting, so ultimately somebody can appeal what the chair's decision is, and it comes back to the group. And so ultimately, the people that sit here, we are either not equal, like myself, or equal, and ultimately it is the responsibility, but also the authority of the group to police the meeting. So just remember you have that authority and use it. And I can tell you, I can count on, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody actually use it.
Yeah.
I honestly, and it's something that Ron Sandek, if he were here, Ron would say the same thing, that a lot of times we're baffled because there are things that we know you can do that you elect not to do, not you personally, but we see that at the different meetings. So just keep those, I think basically those are the main things if you can keep that in mind.
And I'll tell you real quick, two thoughts that I have on this. Number one, the most valuable currency we have, especially as staff, is trust. And the reason why you might not see us jumping in is if you think back to that idea of the role of the staff in this, is that we're to explain, not advocate. If you have a contentious issue and if you have an emotional crowd and staff is leading that meeting and declaring what's out of order or not, that is the fastest way to lose trust. And that is the quickest way to have people complaining on nextdoor.com the next day that you were clearly taking bribes, right? People get, we've all been there, probably not you, right? It is a really, really shortcut way to lose that trust because you are the representatives in that moment, not staff. We're the technicians in the room, right? So we really, really hate having to be the ones to jump in and control that meeting, because it's a really fast way to make the public feel like there's something they don't know and everybody else does. The other stance that I take on this, it is not my job to tell you what you can and cannot do, right? I have a little bit of a laissez-faire attitude that you can ask whatever questions you dang well please, but it is your responsibility to know what is power and what is authority. And it is your responsibility to know that if you're asking bad questions, you're going to have a bad time, right? I've had commissioners ask me before, can you give me a list of questions that are safe to ask? No. No, because there's all manner of different questions we can ask. But I hope that what you take away from this tonight is how you can ask those questions in a way that ties everything back to your standards, in a way that keeps everything nice and on topic, and that you know when you're being, frankly, a little bit cheeky and asking for something you know you don't have the authority to, but you really, really want to see them do brick instead of white siding on those houses. So please, Mr. Developer, would you think about that, please? You know they can tell you no, but you really want to see it. You can air that opinion, but you have to know what carries weight and what doesn't carry weight. And that's the work, right? That is the work part of this volunteer responsibility, is knowing your code, knowing the questions to ask staff around, hey, if I ask the developer for this, is that something I have the authority to ask them for? Your staff's going to let you know, right? There are some things that are absolutely off limits. Like I say, we don't want to ask people like, can you set a minimum rent on this? Cool, now we're in court and HUD's involved and no one's having a good time, right? If it generally falls under a Title IX protected class, probably want to stick away from that one. But other stuff, you can have an interest. You just need to know whether that interest can expand into your decision or not. And I have no problem with commissioners saying like, hey, this is not going to factor into my recommendation at all tonight. I'm just curious as a resident, what kind of fridges do you put in these apartments, right? I have commissioners who are super interested in the interior design of buildings. I've been there. And it's fine to ask those questions, but I much prefer it if you say on the record, it is not going to impact my decision if you tell me Samsung or GE. I'm just interested. Totally reasonable, okay?
Also, all of Phil's points end up in court. You're always getting sued.
No, I've never been.
Oh, I've been deposed. All right.
Hey, look, he's not pointing it.
Yes, the most important slide of the night. You know, I think we've already established, it's not a question of do you like this project. I've seen some projects I personally did not like. The question is, has it met the standards that your community has adopted? You know, as I said, you can dislike a project and vote yes. You can like a project and vote no. I've had to do that very recently. Both happen, and it's okay. Both are correct. Do we need any more discussion about standards?
Do we all feel beat around the head enough?
There is like an evaluation after this, right, Phil?
There is.
Yeah, so. We talked about this a lot too, you know, those items that are not reviewed by your commission. We should know now, does anybody here think a plan commission can regulate rents? Raise your hand. All right, we covered that, You know, business competition, can you regulate how many nail salons you have on a street? Not unless your zoning code tells you specifically that you can. You know, so we hear concerns that are real concerns in these public meetings, but they're not always planning concerns. And you really have to be able to know the difference, because that difference is what protects you as a plan commissioner. You know. Responsibility of the chair, listen to the attorney when he whispers to you. You know, and the chair is not the most powerful member. As the attorney said, you all share that authority, right? But a great chair is a great facilitator for a meeting. That's how I see it. You know, you could take that meeting that's going to be a controversy and at least feel like controlled order or controlled chaos, you know? And a weak chair will make for a bad meeting, you know? It's an appointed position. I think it is like any other plan commission meeting. And so I think, you know, letting elected officials know if you don't have a good chair is appropriate. I felt it was. Typical hearing procedure, we have 3 different communities. You all do something different. Again, I commend Geneva for putting their hearing procedures on the back side of every agenda. That's awesome. So nice. You 3 are the best. Thank you. But, you know, that part, the hard part here, you know, that public comment will come before your deliberation. That could be the hardest part of that procedure to sit through, but you're going to sit through that and do it respectfully. Taking testimony, having a fair hearing. You know, we all know a hearing is not a popularity contest, right? You'll have those 200 people that oppose the project. That does tell you something, of course. But it should never determine your outcome, you know? The only thing that really matters is what it says there, the relevance of the testimony to the standards by which they're held. That's easy for us to say. So, you know, to recap, show up prepared. You know, those are the best meetings when you're prepared. Treat people respectfully. Ask good questions of staff, of each other, of your petitioner, of your applicant, and vote on standards. You do those 4 things and you're going to have great Planning and Zoning Commission meetings for years and years to come. No. Anything else to add, Bill?
No.
Are you a findings of fact expert?
Sure. All right. Let's talk about findings of fact.
I think this is one a lot of plan commissioners want to know more about. 'Cause
So
they get
much.
Totally nervous that they're not doing it right.
So much.
So let them know they're doing it right.
You're doing them right, probably, right? Because you have good staff, right? And that's where we get into this. So let's talk about the name findings of fact, because this is something that really trips people up, because like fact is a normal word, you know? That's like a word that we all know, and it has meaning. And then because a lot of lawyers get paid a lot of money, we put it on top of this document, and suddenly it has, suddenly, I was seeing if I could get away with that one, I didn't. All of a sudden it has different meaning. So the way I like to think of this, the way that's really helped me, this is just the name of the document, right? And there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why it's called findings of fact, but just think about it as simply, your findings of fact is a document. Because I've had commissioners ask me before, well, where does it end? Like, you know, do we need to put on the record that it's a fact that fences exist? Like, and this was a community that hadn't done findings of fact before, and it was new to them, and it was just wild, right? Your findings of fact are fundamentally your written record. So, again, real talk time. A lot of the job of the Plan Commission is taking the heat so the elected officials don't have to. Is that fair to say? The public hearing happens here, so it doesn't have to happen in front of the electeds, right? Now, people are still going to go to that meeting. They're still going to speak about the deer and the children and the whatnot, and they're going to have their voices heard a second time, and that's fine. But in a purely technical sense, the findings of fact are your baton, and you are passing that off to your elected officials, and the idea is they don't need to get in the weeds. They can look at this and see, my commission reviewed this at a public hearing, and they found that it meets or does not meet our standards. That is their findings, right? And your attorney is going to be looking at that, if we get to that worst case scenario, to say, this is what my commission said. These are the facts of the case that they found that it does or it does not meet those standards. If you don't have those, if they're not good, that's where you get into this iffy gray area of, was it actually a little bit of discrimination at play? So your staff will help you prepare these. That's where we got to think more again into your question of like, well, you know, my kind of school of thought on these is I try and write them relatively neutrally, but still in the affirmative, because the idea is, and again, bear with me on this because this is a little bit theoretical on this one, it is the applicant's case. It is not the city's case, right? So the applicant is coming to you and they are bringing you a case to say, we want to develop this and we think we meet your standards. I tell my staff, I don't like writing negative sample standards. There are some schools of thought where they have the commission do it live. That is hell. I like to give them something to work off of. If I, as staff, have not received any information to be able to write a standard, I will write in my draft findings, no evidence submitted that this standard is met. That's not negative, that's relatively neutral, but that should be a clue to my commission that they might want to do some digging in that hearing to see if there is any evidence or if there is not, right? I want to talk a little bit about this idea of setting a precedent. I hear this a lot from commissioners, like, hey, I don't want to approve this Jimmy John's because then when Subway comes in, I'm going to have to approve them as well, and their meat is less quality, right? That is not true. You, as plan commissioners, as zoning officials, you do not set precedent because you are not a legislative body. Everything you do is case by case. You are not bound by any prior recommendation that you have made. Now, should you still be consistent? 100%. You should be consistent with your questioning, with your thought process, with how you apply those standards. But you do not have to recommend approval of Subway just because you recommended approval of Jimmy John's, because there is going to be different facts in that case. It's going to be a different location. There's going to be something different about how they run their operations that needs a little bit of different consideration. Is it likely that it's going to be so materially different? Probably not. But you're measuring this on its case. If I can talk about the British system really, really quickly, two things I really like about it. We have one thing called material consideration, so that's actually baked into the law in the UK as to what can be considered versus what cannot. It's a little bit fuzzier in America sometimes, but it is in the law in the UK that if the public comes to a hearing and they say, it's going to affect my air quality, it's going to affect my light, well, actually those are not material considerations because they're not provable, right? All these kind of things. We don't have that as much here. The other thing that I think is really applicable over here, I tell my commissioners, presumptive, yes. Silently, mindset, go into your hearings presuming you're going to approve this development and then be proved wrong, potentially, right? Why? Because chances are, if it's gotten to you, all of that review work has been done to mean it should be in relatively substantial compliance with your zoning. If it's not, your staff is going to have ways of letting you know that. And that doesn't mean you're just rubber stamping everything that comes before you, but it does mean it changes your mindset a little bit if you're going into this thinking, okay, we're going to approve this development tonight unless something comes out that is absolutely terrible, as opposed to, I hate this, I hate everything, let's see if they can prove me wrong. Totally different meeting. You have much better meetings if you start from the assumption that things are actually probably going to be okay, right? Again, the history of all of this, there is a lot of case law on this. Your standards probably are derived from this, and I like sharing this with you because, again, no plan commission is an island. You are not the first people to do this. You will not be the last people to do this. There are decades of precedent, of legal precedent before you that have shaped the system we have today. And so many, many people, planners, attorneys, you name it, have had their hands on this. And again, it is not too grandiose to say that literally the authority vested in you can be traced all the way back to the 250-year-old U.S. Constitution. The enforcement of zoning is an extension of the police power as found in the Constitution, as delegated to the states, who then delegate it to municipalities. It goes all the way up to that. And I tell you that because it's important to know that you're not doing these things in a vacuum. It shouldn't be arbitrary, it shouldn't be capricious, that there is all of this support and all of this case law surrounding the decisions you're making, and there is a reason that your standards are the way they are. Sometimes you can make them better. That's usually one of my first jobs in a new job, is I look at their standards and say, like, yeah, we're gonna change some of these a little bit, tighten up that language. Again, we'll skip over that. Special and conditional uses, this can be a rough one, because this one can be the one that's kind of a little bit more subjective sometimes, right? The standards can be a little bit more subjective. Again, this is where I want you to think in that presumptive yes. If it's in your zoning code, period, whether it's as a permitted use or a special use, that means the policy of the city is that they want to see that use in that zoning district. It is a special use because there might be something about it that needs a little bit of a closer look, because yes, generally speaking, it's good for that district, but it might not be good for every property on that district, right? Maybe it has certain traffic effects that just wouldn't work on certain properties. Maybe there are certain smells that it emits that means we have to make sure it's located just a little bit differently. You know, if there's residential nearby, that might not be super appropriate. I say that as someone who works in a community that literally prohibits the production of sauerkraut in our zoning code for that very reason. It's that specific. Right? And then when we talk about this idea of considering the public need for the particular use at that particular location, again, that can be really subjective. We're not asking you to do market analysis as to whether that business, bless you, will be successful. We're asking you to consider, hey, does that help us be the type of community we want to be? And like Jason said, we're not putting a hard limit on, I'm going to say no to this because we just approved 3 nail salons. Your zoning code might actually say no more than 3 nail salons in that district. You see that a lot with cannabis. My community has a cap on 3 cannabis dispensaries, right? That is a hard limit that we have to amend a whole bunch of code to change that. But generally speaking, your special uses, it is a yes, as long as we're making sure they work in that location. Variations are a really, really hard one. Do you guys get many of those? Yeah? I'll tell you why variations are hard. These are some of the most emotional cases that you will hear. They are often brought by residents who are not professionals in this arena, who cannot afford an army of attorneys and engineers and planners and architects, who are just coming in because, God damn it, this is America and you're telling me what I can do on my property, right? That's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. And so they require, in my opinion, what I have found to be best practice on this, a harder touch. You need to be relentless in your use of standards when it comes to variations. It makes it clearer, and clearer is kinder. What do I mean by that? Your variation request is based on a hardship. Hardship is a very emotional word. I like to add a word in front of that. It's hyphenated. It's going to sound like 2 words. It's a land-based hardship, okay? What does that mean? That means there is something unique about the property that means that it cannot be built in accordance with your codes. Property, not people, okay? I have had 90-something-year-old ladies on the phone crying to me, asking if she needs to call J.B. Pritzker because I won't let her build a garage the way she wants to, right? That's really difficult because you have to coach her through that and help her understand, like, you know, I get it, but this isn't an emotional plea. This isn't, can I convince them that they need to help me? This is more about what is it unique about that land. Some examples, maybe there's a creek in the middle of it. Maybe there's a 1,000-year-old oak tree that they'd have to cut down to meet your zoning code. That's probably pretty reasonable. Maybe when it was subdivided 50, 60 years ago, it was subdivided to a different standard, and now they've ended up with this really weird-shaped lot that just cannot meet your setback requirements. That is a land-based hardship, right? I bought a big truck, and my big truck doesn't fit in the maximum size garage you will let me have. Not a land-based hardship. That is something the owner has done it to themselves, and you might end up with ransom notes as public comment on that case. Ask me how I know. Right? They can be super emotional because, again, it feels very unfair to that person that you can tell them what to do with their land. Question?
So can a ruling on a variance, could that be something that sets a precedent?
No.
Not at all?
Because
It's still
you're
case by
still
case?
not making legislation.
Right.
You're just making a recommendation.
But I think that's a very
It's a great question.
very common opinion on the planning.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I just found a bit of tree in my pocket. We filmed some promotional videos at work and I was crawling around in trees. I was like, what is stabbing me in the pocket? It's again about that consistency. So you have to be able to confidently say to one neighbor, hey, that variation was granted because of something super unique about their land. Again, I'll give you the example, and this kind of goes back to that person who I had to tell them, like, I think you want to be an elected official. I had this question about, well, you know, what if they have a whole bunch of kids? Like, surely that's unreasonable for us to give them the same size garage as everyone else. I'm like, we don't zone for number of children. And to be completely crass about it, what about the land made them have 5 children, right? And I say that because that's a discrimination lawsuit, right? Pregnancy is a protected class. And so if we start doling out arbitrary decisions around this, unless we codify in our zoning code 28 feet of garage per child, right? We're probably in for a real shaky ground, right? And it's probably going to be really hard to justify that over and over again. So we stick to our standards, and that can be difficult because sometimes you're looking your neighbor in the face and telling them no. Yes?
So I find that sometimes we have cases where, you know, maybe it's like a driveway variation, or they want to add an extra entrance, or, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes in my mind, I think that's not a land problem.
Yeah.
That's a
you problem.
That's a you problem. And yet we still approve those because I think the feeling is no harm, no foul.
Sure.
They want their extra entrance or exit or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
I hear you. Can I give you the hard answer?
Yes.
Sure. Don't approve those, right? Because if it's truly no harm, no foul, everybody should be entitled to that, so that should be a text amendment in your zoning, okay? If we're seeing these types of variations over and over again, and we're constantly approving them, that means our zoning is broken, and someone shouldn't have to come before us for a variation if our zoning is broken. So we have to hit a pause on that, and we have to, I do not recommend approving those as variations, because those run with the land, and those can be real tricky later on in life, right? Instead, take notice of that and say, like, hey, we can't approve this variation, it does not meet our standards. But that's then something for your staff to go off and study around what would be the ramifications of allowing that in that district, of changing the zoning, and that's a policy decision then for your elected officials. Again, it's that idea of that case in front of you, the policy is paused, they have to meet the standards as written right now, but it's your job as a commissioner to say, like, staff, this is clearly not working, right? And I'm working on a zoning code that hasn't been changed since the 70s, and I'm throwing it out and we're starting again. And one of the first activities we did was sit down with that plan commission and say, what are the variations you approve all the time? What are the special uses you approve all the time? Because they shouldn't be variations and they shouldn't be special uses. People should not have to pay a fee to just get essentially this guaranteed yes. That means something is broken in our code. So that's how we go about it. Yes?
One other thing to keep in mind is that, you know, there's sort of the old adage, tough facts make bad law, which is sort of, this is a very sympathetic case, and so we want to accommodate this. But if nothing else, our recent history and our public discourse, and maybe the decline in the quality of the public discourse, is that as the individuals that sit up here, almost assuredly, as you approve that tough fact scenario for this particular person, the neighbor is going to come by and want to strangle you for approving that tough case for this particular person. You just haven't heard from them yet. And so if you keep yourself to those standards, you can literally say, you know, it's the Judge Schmale's defense. I didn't want to do it. I felt I owed it to him. Caddyshack? No. I sent boys younger than you to the electric chair. I didn't want to do it. I felt I owed it to him. But it's the Judge Schmale's defense from Caddyshack. what you're saying is, I don't make the policy. My job is to apply the policy to the facts. And while I appreciate your situation, unfortunately, there's nothing I can do. And if you do that, that's absolutely true. And if you really want to push it, you can say, you know, I appreciate you think that this is unfair. That might be something you want to bring up with your elected officials, because they're the ones that set the policy. And I think the other point is, if you do see something that you think doesn't make sense, it's not clear, it's difficult to apply, you are absolutely justified in raising that issue with the elected officials, because it's very possible, since we have a former alderman here, or alderperson, it's very possible that the alder people don't see what you see meeting after meeting after meeting. And so they may not even be aware of that. It's probably a good idea to talk to David or Matt or Jesse first, because they can fashion it in the right way. But it's really important. An example that we had, I think, were the outbuildings, right? When we recently, we allowed for those outbuildings, I want to call them like
The accessory dwelling?
yeah. And so I think we had a conversation here, but that was an example of where we were saying, this is something we're going to see, and so we want to accommodate this. And so, to your point, Rebecca, it's not that you cannot have policy concerns and policy opinions. You absolutely can. We just don't want you to express those when you're hearing a case. We want you to express those to staff, or even after a case is over, and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? And then we have the right vehicle and mechanism to bring that to the city council to get that enacted. So I don't want to say the answer is no, it's just not in this venue. It's outside of a case.
It's help more people, right? It's fix that part of the code that's clearly not working and fix it for everybody, is how I like to think of it, right? And that way you're not making people pay those fees and come in front of you every time for something that you clearly think they should just be allowed to do, right?
So, and this is a question for staff, when these kinds of things come up and somebody says, well, all I want is this thing, like whatever it is, seems small or arbitrary or whatever, it's my property, why shouldn't I be, you know, so when we get the reports, and you know, and they've written out their justification for the project, and it seems like they've met their standard, then it is incumbent upon us to say, well, we're not setting precedent here. We're not, you know, so I guess sometimes I feel like, are we setting them up for failure if we say, come with your question or your issue, and then
I'll tell you to answer if I can dive in front of this bullet for you.
Explaining my question in a very succinct way, but
yeah, no, I think what I'm hearing is why does it even come before us?
Exactly.
Is that kind of the question,
yes,
right?
thank you.
Yeah.
How did it even get to us?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we cannot stop them, and that's how. And I'll speak from a personal experience with this one. That's how I ended up in that situation with the ransom note. Like, I spoke to this guy, and I put hours upon hours meeting with this guy and saying, like, look, man, I get it. I'm trying to help you by not making you spend $1,000 for something that I'm telling you our commission and board will not and cannot approve, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, anybody has the legal right to apply for anything. And I'll tell you, you're going to see this more and more in the news now. Controversial topics, right? Let's step outside of the variations for a minute. Let's talk warehouses, data centers, these things that people get really kind of emotional about a lot now. Mm-hmm. You're going to hear members of the public, and they're going to stand before you, and they're going to say, it is disgusting that the city is even considering this. Mm-hmm. How has it got to this point? Why did you let them apply? You cannot stop them. We are not allowed to tell someone they cannot apply. Anybody can apply for anything. We as staff are going to do our damnedest to get them up to what I think of as substantial compliance. We're going to get that case in the best shape possible to come before you. It still might not be a great shape. That ransom note case I'm talking about, that guy came before them with hand-drawn plans that said height TBD. I worked with that dude for months. I'm like, this is bad. Like, this isn't, it is my job as the neutral planner to tell you, you're not making a good case for yourself, but you have the right to do a bad job. And that's why it comes before you, because if someone has $1,000 that they really want to light up in flames and this is how they want to do it, they have the right to do that. Is that reasonable?
That's reasonable. Yeah, I think variations are something we struggle with. That exact situation, I don't think you have a strong case. I don't know how you're going to meet this standard. And sometimes our analysis that we put in the report is loose because of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't like being told no. You know, I've had to debate someone on zoning before now because they came to me and say, well, you say what my minimum setback is, but you don't say what my maximum setback is, so I'm going to tell you I have a different maximum setback, and therefore I don't have a side yard, so I can build whatever I want in my yard. And like the mental gymnastics that I had to do to keep up with this guy, and then be like, that's not how any of that works, but I can't explain to you why it doesn't work that way, because none of this makes sense to me. But it's a technical job, and not everybody is a technical expert, and that's why. And this is the other hard part, if I can share one other thing on variations really quickly. Where it gets really hard sometimes is you'll have a lot of commercial projects that have variations built into them sometimes as part of their approval. And sometimes it can be really kind of icky feeling that you feel like you're approving commercial variations all the time, but you're probably denying residential variations a lot. And that's because these commercial properties are often built on land that is way harder to develop, especially as your community matures. It is much more likely that either your zoning code is not kind of up to speed with where commercial development is these days, because things like clear heights in warehouses have changed, or whatever it might be, right? Or they've already built all the good land that could have been built to code, and now they're stuck with the dregs that has crappy topography, whatever it might be. So the uncomfortable truth is, it's usually the case that a commercial variation has a stronger case than a residential one, because your residential cases are often Sandra from down the street, and she just wants to build her garage where she wants to build her garage, damn it. And, you know, variation is kind of this almost like pop culture term now that, you know, how many times have staff answered the phone? It's like, yeah, I need a variation. When can I be on the next plan commission meeting? What are you trying to do? Is it a variation? I don't know, right? So that's where I say lean a little harder into, it's a highly unlikely case that a residential case is going to be eligible for a variation. If it is, you're going to know it, because it's going to be a weird piece of land, okay? Any questions on any of that stuff? I like that you guys are interrupting. This is good. I like it when it's a conversation. Oh, you get to do the law stuff. Good luck.
Stuff is easy. You know, so this section is all about, you know, like how a good commissioner could get themselves into trouble. You don't get in trouble for how you voted, yes or no, provided you voted on the standards. These are the little things in the process that can get you in trouble. So ex parte communications, I learned this in my first planning job when the Historic Preservation Commissioner liked to meet each applicant at their house so he could personally see the quality of the historic home. He would disclose it in the meeting. I met him at his house to see his home, but it drove us up a wall, you know. But not going that far, none of you would. I mean, how many has been stopped at the grocery store, the gas station, right? We're all the public. We live here. We have neighbors with strong opinions. My neighbors have no data center signs in their front yard. I might have to vote on that someday. I mean, there's not a case now, but you never know. So, you know, I think if that conversation is important enough to influence how you vote, this is your script. Please bring that to the hearing or send it to staff. Don't say, tell me more. Say, don't respond with your opinion. Say, please bring that comment to the public hearing, or please email staff. That's how you don't get in trouble by talking about a case when you're not talking about it in the form in which it's supposed to be talked about, and that is here in this room in the public hearing.
One other thing you can say, and I tell this to my clients too, when we're talking about attorney-client privilege, if somebody asks you why you can't talk about it, come on, they're not going to let you go. My attorney told me, and you can give him my name, Scott Finson told me that I'm not allowed to talk about this.
Just remember, Scott,
Yep.
St. Charles, Batavia, just remember his name.
No, I'm serious. You can say the attorney told me, and that's usually enough for people to say, oh, okay, the attorney said I can't talk about it. End of story. I mean, that's a better answer, but if they push you and they won't let you go, that's the response.
Yeah.
I took one of these before.
Okay, great.
I took one of these classes before when I first went on the Plan Commission, and it was pretty clear on this for developers and applicants, but I never saw it before, opponents or supporters. I never saw that before, so that's a good, clarity piece. But also, what about after it's all done? What if we're out of the picture?
After your vote has happened?
After our vote is done?
Hearing's closed, yeah.
Yeah, the hearing, yeah, right, that's what I'm wondering, if it's after the.
You could probably have a conversation. You go to Pollyanna or art
Yeah.
history or whatever it is, and
Yeah, I think the supporters and opponents one is super important, because what you're
Yeah.
seeing more so now, the reason I really like that one is because if you just bump into a neighbor at the grocery store and they ask you about it and you tell them something, the worst thing you want to happen is that they turn up and say, yeah, I saw Rebecca and Jewel and she said this whole thing was a terrible idea, and and that could be completely misrepresentative of the conversation you had, so that's why I like to extend it to them.
Got it, makes sense.
In terms of afterwards, I would say generally speaking, my take on it is, even if you're out of the picture, wait until it's gone to council.
Yep.
And even then, if council voted no, keep waiting. And I tell you that because, again, it comes back to this idea that your attorney's goal is going to be to get them punted back to you. So you don't know when you're out of the picture. If something has been denied, it might end up back in your laps. It's totally possible. It's totally possible, and I've seen this happen, where between your meeting and the council meeting, the developers made changes in the plan, and your council gets this, and they say, this isn't what my plan commission reviewed, you have to go back to them. You don't know when you're out of the picture. Until that building is built and is now named after you, let's hold off.
Yeah, I agree with Phil on that. In Lamont, we did recently have a case where it went to the committee of the whole with a negative recommendation from the Plan Commission. The applicant responded to some of the concerns they had, and the village board said, I'd like the Plan Commission to reconsider this. So it did come back for a second hearing. So that's rare in my career, but it has happened.
The only other thing I would say too is that you never, I can't remember the name of the Roman or Greek that said it, but you almost never regret what you didn't say. And so if you talk about it, you never know how people are going to hear it, or more importantly, how they're going to remember it. If you sort of take the position so that somebody says to you, well, why didn't you ever talk about it? You're never going to have to give a deposit, but if you did, why didn't you ever talk about it? Well, because the lawyer told me I wasn't supposed to talk about it before the meeting, because that's our ethical rules. And also, I don't talk about it after the meetings because I just think it can create confusion and it doesn't serve anybody, so I just don't talk about it. And you can, again, say, the lawyer told me not to talk about it. And that keeps your life very simple.
Thank you.
So let the process speak for itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ethics, keep it short. When in doubt, disclose. Sort of similar to being quiet. No commissioner has ever been criticized for being too transparent. And quite often the opposite happens all the time. Planning professionals like us, as it says, have ethical principles by which we subscribe to. Some communities have ethics commissions and the like. Again, this is a question for you. If something's a question for you, ask your attorney, ask your staff, and they will help guide you on that. Conflict of interest is always something that I think commissioners overestimate. Real conflicts involve money, ownership, employment, financial interest, business relationships. You know, in a town like this where 3 communities are coming together, right? Geneva, Batavia, St. Charles, you know a lot of people. As we said, you're in the grocery store, you're at the brewery. You will know your applicants. You will know the public. Just because you know them, that is not a relationship that prevents you from being fair, right? I'm a member of the Lions. I know a lot of people in Lamont because of that. Some of them will go to that. I don't have to say, I can't vote on this case because I'm a member of the Lions Club. So, recuse, disclose, these are 2 different things. So, recusal is not punishment. It just means somebody else should be making the decision. So when you recuse yourself, if an actual conflict of interest exists, no discussion, no debate, leave the room. You should not be a part of that public hearing. If your wife is asking for that garage variation, you should not be in, well, you should really ask her not to ask for that variation. You know, the other one, I think, are appearance issues. You know, disclosing something doesn't create a problem, it kind of solves one, right? If you think there's an appearance, like, hey, I know he's a member of the Lions and they want a new patio or whatever it is, it's okay to disclose that relationship. And it's probably good because people probably know the relationship already and maybe are making decisions about how you're doing. So I think it just, again, being transparent, clearing the air, I think that usually will solve problems of conflict of interest. Yeah.
Has this come up before? I'm going to say some stuff that's going to sound real common sense, but again, it all comes from real experience. These things happen at the beginning of the item, right? I have experienced it before where we have had a commissioner, and I've had this happen multiple times in multiple towns, and I've heard other communities, right, when I've been out training them, where, you know, we've had the discussion, a commissioner has made their statements, their opinions, they've weighed in, they've questioned the applicant, and then we're taking the vote and we call the roll, and it gets to Commissioner Smith, and Commissioner Smith says, I'm going to abstain because I have a conflict of interest in this case. Pin drop, right? All the air goes. I had a beautiful head of hair before that happened to me twice. That's bad in multiple ways. Abstentions are not the same as recusals. Abstentions are frankly nonsense, in my humble opinion. This is personal opinion, not on behalf of APA Illinois. If you are a commissioner and you have a vote, use it. It should be super rare that you're abstaining on something. Your abstention goes with the majority anyway. Again, you're up there to have an opinion, have it, right? Your recusal happens at the beginning, and if I can tell you one fun story on this one, I was giving this training to a community. The chairperson had been the chairperson for 40 years, just a wonderful man, super boisterous, really jolly, really friendly, great night, and we get to this slide. And I give that whole, you know, like that happens at the meeting, goes, son, I'm gonna stop you there. I'm great at this. I've done this before, I know this stuff real well. So, you know, one time, I had a case come in, I was a part owner on the property, so I said, you know what, I have a conflict of interest in this, so I'm gonna recuse myself. I stood up, I walked to that door in the back of the room, and then I turned around and I said to them, but just so you all know, I would vote yes.
Oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh.
So you see how we've just undone all the good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're saying it at the top, we're giving staff a heads up that we're going to recuse because that might have some quorum issues, right? We're letting people know ahead of time, like, hey, I've got a conflict on this one, so I'm gonna go ahead and recuse myself from that case. And then as soon as the chairperson calls, all right, next item on the agenda is this case. Chairperson, I just want to note I have a conflict of interest on this case. I'm a part owner of the property, whatever it might be. I'd like to recuse myself from this one. And then from that moment on, you don't utter another word. You just get up, you walk out, you go play Candy Crush in the hallway. Cool?
And if you're not sure, if you have, it's not your job to decide if you have a conflict. So let's say you're not sure if you do, but there's a fact pattern and you don't remember all these details. That's not your job. Call staff, they will call us, and Ron or Chuck or I or your attorneys, they will give an opinion about whether or not there's an actual conflict. And a conflict, just so everybody knows, is not because your neighbors are angry with you. And there are people that you'll see that will bow out and won't vote. They'll either abstain, which is more often what happens, but that's also not a conflict. And so you're here, and if at some point you're like, I just can't take it anymore, that's okay. It's okay to retire from being on a commission. But the reason we want you here is because you're in this community and because you have those experiences. So your role is important, so we do want you to vote unless there really is a conflict.
Yeah. And we discussed a little bit, some of the things that are not conflicts of interest, So, our small towns couldn't function if we didn't know each other, right? So a personal connection is not a disqualification, I should say. A personal connection is not necessarily a conflict, so don't feel bad about that. Open Meetings Act. Everybody takes Open Meetings Act training as a part of the Plan Commission, so I don't think I need to go over this too much, but, these are trust laws. That's why we have them, so that people that don't agree with the decisions that are made, really, generally for the people that don't agree with the decisions that are made, at least they can be confident that decision was made out in the open. So we do have that. Open Meetings Act, some of the, requirements of that act you'll know well as plan commissioners about when we have to post the hearing, when you have to post the agenda. In today's day and age, email and text and all of that pose risks to Open Meetings Act. That email's forever, basically. And for me and Phil, that email is public. So, and for David and Matt and Jesse. So, just be cognizant of it. You should. I would just say the safest place to discuss public business is where the public can hear you in a public meeting. So that's the easy way to avoid a violation of the Open Meetings Act. We have to update that. No one does instant messaging anymore, Phil. Do you still have your AOL address?
Maybe. Well, I still have a copy of email address, which is even more.
Okay, so this is just sort of the recap, on financial interest or business relationships are generally when you have that conflict of interest, and to be sure that we're keeping the hearing at the hearing, right? We're having our debates on this stage, at this podium, with these people, with these actors, and easy thing, when in doubt, disclose and ask staff or a attorney. We're getting up to 9.
We're so close to the end.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Any questions on this stuff? Who can speed run tools of the trade? Okay.
Watch me fly through this. We've talked about so much of this stuff already, right? The policy stuff, the policy planning, that is my world. That is what I do every single day. I don't do the development stuff anymore. This gets to the heart of all the questions that have come up so far, honestly, right? When people are frustrated with process, the case in play is not where we make the changes, it's at the policy level. These are the things that we're having input into our comprehensive plans. These are the things that we're having input into any of these other plans that we might see. That's where we're having the substantive conversation about what do we want this town to be when it grows up, right? That's where all of that meaty conversation is happening. It is not happening when there's an active case in play in front of you, and you have a role in that, right? We're super lucky in Illinois. A lot of states have really, really strict state statutes on what a comprehensive plan needs to include, what it should have. We're in a great position where we can really tailor our comprehensive plans to the community because we don't have strict guidance from the state on what they must be. The state just says, you can have one if you want one. They give us a lot of authority, right? That's where our village board draws a lot of their policy authority from, is being able to point back to a comprehensive plan and say, this was the adopted policy of the village, I actually include it as a standard in zoning codes I work on for special uses. Does this use meet the policy goals of the village as enumerated in any adopted plans and studies, right? Because that's a huge one. That's a question that's before you a lot when you're considering cases. Something might be controversial, let's say an apartment building might be kind of controversial. People can get a little bit afraid of those. You need to know, does my community have a policy on how we want to grow? Because if we do, does this development support that or does it not, right? Are we looking to be a community that has more housing? If yes, we should be approving projects like these if they're in the right place. There's a whole bunch of things that go into them. Again, your staff knows the way around these. They might engage a consultant. You guys consultant on this one? Yeah, who is it?
Lakota.
Cool. They do great stuff. What do we want in-house right now? I love that freedom because I'm writing a comp plan that is exclusively for my community, and I can do a lot of stuff that we couldn't do with a consultant because they have their process. But if you get a really good consultant, they can give you a great comprehensive plan that addresses the needs that your communities are facing. This is the thing that I cannot hit on enough. Your role in the comprehensive planning process, you are the cheerleaders, you are the ambassadors. You are going to your neighbors and saying, hey, do you guys know we're doing this right now?
Take the survey.
Take the survey, right? Yep. I arm all of my plan commissioners and all of my elected officials with business cards and postcards that they carry on them at all times. So when someone comes up to them and says, what's the village up to? They can hand it, oh, hey, we're actually doing this plan, take the survey. It's got a QR code, it's got the website, right? You should be carrying that information with you because a plan is only as good as its input, and its input is only good if it's representative of the community. Your staff are experts in this kind of stuff. This is the part of the job that we love. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that. None of us went to planning school so we could process residential variations. We went to planning school to work on stuff like this. And not every planner gets the opportunity to do so. So when this comes up in your career, you jump on that because it's an opportunity to make real difference and really genuinely help people, right? So there's all different ways we can do this. My guidance to all of you, don't be afraid of online engagement. I think if you look at those CMAP community snapshots we told you about before, more people have access to the internet than you think. I think we have this still gut instinct of what about the 90-year-olds at home without internet? I guarantee you grandma's got a Facebook account, right? More people have access to these tools than you would ever imagine. We should embrace it. We should be doing both because I like being in costume, and I am in costume at every public engagement event I do. My car is still stained green from the time I was Shrek. We say that because part of the job here is making that participation easy for people, right? Sometimes you're going to have that public meeting and only 2 people are going to come out, and that sucks. Sometimes you're going to go out there and 600 people are going to turn up and you didn't print enough resources, and that is a great night. You walk into work the next day feeling like $1 million because you just talked to 600 people about what they want the future of their community to look like. So being that ambassador, being that cheerleader, and supporting your staff and making sure people know about this is a huge job for you. One of the things that I think is crucial, asking who is missing. So when we know, because of that data resource I told you about, that CMAP community snapshot, if we know that 20% of our community is non-white, that 60% of our community rents their homes, right? I'm making these numbers up. And if we look at all the public engagement we've done, and the only people we've spoken to are white homeowners, we've done something wrong. We are not planning for our whole community. So we need to come up with interesting ways to get people out. There's a couple real easy ways to do that. Give them food, give them childcare, and go to places where people are at. I love all 3 of your towns. You guys have great communities. The Swedish Day stuff that is already all over downtown Geneva. You have so many built-in community events, things that people show up to. Be there. Be in the community, right? I have spoken to 2,000 of my residents over the past year by just going to events that are already happening and getting their input on this plan. I'm not asking you to do the work of getting the input on your plans. I'm asking you to be at the events and let people know these things are happening and how they can get involved, because that's going to make for a better plan. Better plan makes for better policy makes for better standards make for better meetings for you. And then we have a bunch of different tools that we implement them. My one big takeaway from all of this, zoning is the day-to-day work that we do, but zoning exists to implement plans. It is a tool. The zoning we use is a tool to guide development to deliver the village, the town, the city that we plan for. And everything you do, every standard you enforce should be in service of that plan, of reaching that vision. My philosophy on planning, plans should be audacious, they should be big, and they should set goals that are impossible to reach, because you should always be striving to make it better. There should be some goals you should reach, because every politician, right, needs to have a win. But the big picture goals should be aspirational. And you should have a sense as to what this community should, what direction you're always striving in. And the work that you do as plan commissioners, as zoning officials, directly plays into if your community reaches those aspirations or if it does not. That is the whole presentation. Are there any questions for the good of the order?
I just want to, through a lot of this discussion, we've been talking about helping people understand why we can't rule on their case specifically because it doesn't meet the standards, and to move it along into the political process and so on and so forth. When you talk about getting people, being out in the community, talking to people, what I found is that most of the people we come in contact with have never had much contact with government before. They don't have any idea. And when you tell them, I'm sorry, I can't help you, they wonder what the hell we're doing here. And if they tell you to go to the city, they don't know their member of council. They don't know who their alderman is. They don't even know what ward they live in most of the time. They don't know how to do this. And so it really is important, I think, to get out there, as you say, into the community. Get to the farmer's market. That to me has been the most beneficial place to go.
Batavia has a really good
Batavia. I mean, we have people from all over the metropolitan area there. So does Geneva, not to slight you guys. But
no,
it's important to remember that these people are not to be pejorative, but ignorant of what's the process and the people. And, get them involved if you can. That's all.
I appreciate that. I think that was a statement, not a question, but I'm with it.
I think that's extremely important, and there are times, and so one of the things that they've talked about it, you being the sort of the welcoming guest. So when somebody comes in, and that may be the very first time that they've had any interaction with government, it is about, and it can be difficult because they're emotional, but sometimes even after a meeting saying, hey, listen, I heard you were upset about this, and this isn't what we do, but I can tell you where this goes. Or if you're not sure, you can ask staff, and they can help rechannel that passion. Sometimes you can't do anything, and people are still going to think that, they're going to think that as an older person, well, did you quit your job? Because they assume that it's like Chicago, or they're going to say, well, how come you all are, they'll confuse you. Why don't you tell the school board what to do all the time? Mm-hmm. Or they don't understand their tax bill. I mean, those are all very common scenarios. But I think to the extent that you're able to point people to resources, and if you don't have the answer to questions, send them to staff, or they'll send them to me, and we'll try to explain that and explain why the process is what it is. Because you can, that frustration you're describing, it is palpable. It's just misinformed.
And I'll tell you, to humble brag a little bit, I got an award this year for public service. It was really nice. I got to go to Philadelphia, get a nice little pin. And the thing that I took away from it, the phrase that was used, and I shared a humble brag part because I think I like to place it in the context of this is happening in every town and city across the country. What we do is democracy on the doorstep. We are the closest unit of government to people. We have the most direct impact on people. That's my why. That's why I do what I do. That's why I choose to work public sector and not private sector. That's a huge part of my career. I feel like from our early conversations, that's a huge part of why you're all in the seats that you're in. It's to help people, right? And like I said before, listening doesn't always mean agreeing, but it does mean acknowledging. And sometimes that just means hearing people out, acknowledging the emotion, right? Acknowledging the frustration sometimes and giving them those resources that, yeah, maybe they won't get the answer they want, but as long as they know they feel heard. I have been in meetings, and this is my final sub-story of the night, and it doesn't end in court. But I will note that his story ended in someone getting strangled. I have been in a meeting where 100 and something people dragged me and my commissioners across hot coals for hours. Allegations of bribery, allegations of corruption, you name it, they threw it out there because they really did not want to see this development get approved. And the vote happened, and the project didn't get approved. It did not meet the standards. Those people came up to me, hey man, thank you so much for your professionalism. We super appreciate the way you've handled all of this, right? And I'm like, what, right? That was kind of like my first experience with that, but it's true. And a lot of the times, right, and I tell you this, there's a really great book that I love. It's called Neighborhood Defenders, and it's like an academic study of opposition to housing. And once you take that 30,000-foot view, you start to realize that there is a little bit of a playbook for anti-development movements, and you start to realize it's really not personal. It's just people are trying to find the emotional triggers or the legal triggers that they can pull on because at their core they're afraid of that change, right? And it's our job to help them navigate that and process that, to have the information, right? We can lead that horse to the water, but we cannot make it drink. So as long as we're running good meetings, we're being transparent, we're being ethical, and we can sleep well at night knowing that we've applied our standards, we are doing that public service. That's my soapbox on this one. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, guys. You guys were a super engaged audience. We really appreciate that. Just so you all know, there are a bunch of resources at the back of your slides. I'm not going to display those slides. I tell everyone, planning is like ice cream. You might find your favorite flavor, but it's all good. So there's resources for if you're interested in historic development, if you're more interested in economic development. There's all kinds of different rabbit holes you can go down. But, you know, explore, ask your staff. We're all nerds for this kind of stuff. We love talking about this kind of stuff. I've done follow-up trainings in my community where I've brought our building officials to talk building codes because, like, hey, you guys don't enforce these, this guy does. Ask him questions so you can see what he does for work. He'd love to tell you. You can find out as much as you want, but staying engaged, and like I said, you guys have been wonderful tonight, that is key. We have a sign-up sheet. If you haven't signed it, please do. That way you get your little certificate to prove that you stuck with us for a few hours. There are also a feedback survey that I think you should all have. Fill that out. I will read them, and if they're bad, I will throw them out on the way out.
Thank you. Phil and Jason, thank you very much. That was outstanding. So we appreciate that.
Now back to your meeting, right?
That's right. That concludes.
Angry public.
That's right. That concludes item agenda number 5, and we move on to item agenda number 6, public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, other business.
I don't have any major updates for our group. We had a couple projects come before us at our last meeting. Those are scheduled to go to council at future council dates, right. So we'll have an update once those go to council. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 25th. Right now, I don't have anything for that agenda, so look out for an update on that if that is going to be canceled or not. Okay. And that's all I got.
And lastly, it's a good opportunity. We have a new commissioner on the Geneva Planning and Zoning Commission, Brittany Baker. It's their first meeting, and a lot to take in tonight.
This was your first meeting?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. We look forward to working with you. You're going to bring great perspective. So, anything else? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
A Moran, motion to adjourn.
Holloman, second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That goes for Batavia too, I guess.